In today's journey, we take a look at how to use exotic ingredients in beer. And to draw a line of distinction, we'll say it's stuff that you have to get not from a brew shop. Now, we're not being the fun police, but we are saying you should probably put a little thought into what you're putting into your beer and body. It is easy to forget that brewing and vinting is actually a science, so you shouldn't be surprised when you put strange ingredients in and strange things happen to your product. The most annoying thing with exotic ingredients is that it makes people think that they're so original. If I've had a nickel for every Sour Patch Kid and Mountain Dew-based brew I've heard of. Now, it is important to have fun and express yourself. It's a hobby. Just be mindful of how you approach the ingredients, and it won't be will it brew, it'll be how to brew it. Anything can be a beer, wine, cider, or mead, you just have to think of the consequences. And that's the number one reason that you won't see a roast beef, sushi, or rat poison beer. Well, that's not completely true. I've seen people try to make a bacon beer before. It didn't take long for it to go rancid, or I think someone actually did get sick from it. That's because bacon contains something called animal fat, which can go rancid. Something they were well aware of going into the project, which is why it was for fun. But something that would be funner is brewing with Sour Patch Kids. That's because once you read the label, you'll find out that it's mostly just acids and flavoring, along with cornstarch and 3 types of sugar. Fun fact, it's the only candy on this table that's vegan friendly. In fact, the only downside to brewing with Sour Patch Kids is the cornstarch. It's either going to just make your brew cloudy or settle out to make extra trub in the bottom. But the most important reason you would want to read the label is that maybe you could just use the raw ingredients instead. Now, I don't have to tell you that the first marshmallows were made from the sap from the marshmallow flour, but most of the modern day marshmallows are made from vanilla and sugar. So unless you're going to do something like toast the marshmallows first, what would be the point of using pre-made marshmallows? Well, unless you like gelatin. Because that's basically what it is. Gelatin, 3 types of sugar, and some flavoring. But let's take a closer look at that label to find out more. And we don't find anything too crazy. Corn syrup, sugar, modified cornstarch, gelatin, water, dextrose, natural and artificial flavor, and some word I'm not going to try to say. So we can get our own sugars. We don't need these to stay in marshmallow shape, so the cornstarch and gelatin are actually useless. Natural and artificial flavor, well, we can get our own vanilla. But what's this mystery ingredient in the end? Well, it's there for adjusting pH balance, and something about removing naturally occurring calcium ions from proteins. Food science, because we're living in the future, baby. But because it's a marshmallow, it's probably just here to increase gel strength. So nothing too outlandish, brew with it if you want, but, whatever, man. Let's move on to these peeps. They're basically just marshmallows going through a phase. And other than the order the ingredients are in, they're basically the same. Sugar, corn syrup, gelatin, potassium sorbate. We add that to kill the yeast and stop fermentation. And what's this carnauba wax? That can't be good. Also, this may contain milk. That's something we need to know as brewers. But that's the least of our worries. First off, if you're brewing with peeps, you probably don't have a lot of friends because a lot of people hate peeps. But also, the potassium sorbate will likely kill your yeast, so if you add this during fermentation or bottle conditioning, you're probably going to run into problems and extra sediment. But also this carnauba wax is probably going to lead you to some head retention problems if you're brewing a beer. On the plus side, there's no cornstarch, so that means something to somebody. So unless you're looking for that clickbait, peeps should never be used for brewing because they bring in too many trouble ingredients. Not like our buddies the Sour Patch Kids. Last label, I promise. In this one we have sugar, inverted sugar, corn syrup, modified cornstarch, tartaric acid, citric acid, natural and artificial flavors. But where's the weird stuff? Modified cornstarch, but that's not really that weird. It's just cornstarch that's been eaten by enzymes a bit. Although one could say that the natural and artificial flavors can be some pretty weird stuff. Secretion of beaver anal glands? Yeah, I don't like raspberry either. It's in the marshmallows too. That's what they mean by natural. When someone says natural flavor instead of vanilla, yeah, sorry. But if you eat them and you love them, you know what? Brew with them. That's not going to do anything bad to your beer. Cider, mead, maybe even a Sour Patch wine. Why not? But you may have noticed that tartaric acid and citric acid are both products that you can buy at a homebrew shop. You can also get malic acid too. In fact, when you mix all 3 of them together, you get what the homebrew supply shop calls acid blend. These 4 products have 2 main uses. First is to adjust the flavor profile of cider. And the other thing that it does while doing that is adjust the pH because they're acids. How much? Hard to tell. It would be hard to prevent your fermentation from happening due to it, but you may stress your yeast out, prevent good mashing, or just create a weird tasting experience at the end. Do a pH reading. And a last note that Sour Patch Kids do have different flavors based off their colors. So you may have a better result buying bulk single colors online versus buying boxes and sorting them out, unless a fruit mix is what you were looking for in a final product. And yes, you should be Googling what's on these ingredient lists for yourselves and know what's inside the label. Leave the guess and check brewing to the first year college students. That's not for brewmasters. And that's a word that gets thrown around too much. What's the difference between a brewer and a brewmaster? Well, one does the math, and the other's doing an action. Alright, we just have a few more things to get through before we're ready to brew with some of these stranger ingredients out there. And it's just a few questions that you have to ask yourself. One, is it moral? That may sound dumb, but this ingredient right here actually comes with a warning label that they're not liable for death. Maybe a cute joke? Maybe Mad Dog's yellow cake pure capsaicin is not a joke at 1.6 million Scoville units. That's not even the highest. You can get the plutonium number 9. It's 9.35 million Scovilles. And sure, yeah, maybe you're not making the world's hottest hard seltzer, but, there are other moral dilemmas. And that also goes with other more mundane ingredients such as peanut butter and lactose. There could be medical, ethical, or religious reasons why they're avoiding certain ingredients or food products. And that's why breweries and food manufacturers have to legally disclose such information. And you should too if you're a home brewer giving out beer to your friends. Speaking of legality, who remembers Sparks or the original Four Locos? And while not completely illegal, the FDA would definitely come at you if you started producing an alcoholic energy drink en masse. Also in Michigan, right before we legalized recreational marijuana, they tried to pass legislation to prevent weed from making its way into beer. And it only takes one poorly written law for a law to not only affect mass production, but also the home brewer as well. This is going to vary mostly by local ordinance, but things change over time too, so keep an eye out. Also, it shouldn't come up that much, but it's something to be mindful of. And to reiterate, we're not here to be the fun police. Do crazy and wild crazy brews. Make a wine out of a fruit you've never heard of before. Hell, one of my favorite beers has black peppercorns in it. Let's summarize by using maple syrup as an example, a common ingredient that a lot of people misuse. That's because a lot of people forget that it's nearly 66% sugar. That means it's amazing for back sweetening, but if you were to say, let the yeast eat that sugar, you're going to lose a lot of your maple flavor. But sometimes eating the sugar is what you want, such as bottle conditioning. But that can take some fancy math, so that's where the extracts come in. You can add maple flavor at bottling without adding sugar. And the way you do this is by just knowing the ingredients that you're working with your beer. And look, I've been there. You're at the grocery store, you see something cool, and you're like, hey, I want to make a beer with that. Maybe a wine or a cider. But you know what I'm not going to do? Wonder why it's cloudy, or why my pH is off, or wonder why fermentation kicked up again because I added something into secondary. That's secondary phase, not secondary fermentation. Though I guess it would be secondary fermentation at this point. I'm going to go have an existential crisis, so why don't you check out some of these other videos, or at least like, comment, and subscribe if you encourage what we're doing.